I want to face this way. So we're going to talk again about pushing and pulling specifically. So the way I categorize it in my head from a programming perspective and coaching perspective is that we can push and we can pull things. We could do it vertically, we could do it horizontally, and we could do it at any angle. And actually I have a full program that's like basically working on the ability to get more overhead and comfortable with that position and it being more functional. That progressively works up to that, because just jumping into like a straight overhead press for people that are untrained or injured is just like, that's just a challenging position to be in. But with these principles, we can actually work our way towards being here without compensation. And so we can kind of talk about that a little bit, but general principles with pushing and pulling are basically how I coach it is against what the typical fitness industry coaches. So that's shoulder blades down and back with all movements. And so if you were to grab this band and just row it towards you and squeeze your shoulder blade down and back, good. And now without letting your shoulder blade leave that position, just let the band go a little bit until your arm is straight. Keep your shoulder packed and then pull it in. Okay, so if we row like that, you can relax. If we row that way, and what you probably noticed and felt is that if we do that, we're basically only working like the posterior delt and posterior cuff of the shoulder with that dynamic motion. You get some isometric work with mid traps, low traps, rhomboids to hold the shoulder blade in that position, which can be of value in certain circumstances. But like if our goal is to actually get physiologic change, hypertrophy, muscle strength gains with the back muscles, low traps, mid traps, rhomboids specifically, then we actually need to get the motion of the shoulder blade. We need to get the shoulder blade to move. And so the way that I coach it and typically talk about it is to free the shoulder blade. And you actually heard some of that today in class. And so I want you to do the same thing. Row it, pack the shoulder down and back, but then when you let it go, I actually want you to let the band take your shoulder blade forward, okay? So pack the shoulder, great, that's great. Now let this go, control it, and then without turning your torso, so keep your torso parallel, let your shoulder kind of reach forward, let the band take it. So there's gonna be a lot less tension in it, yep. And then pull it towards you, do a couple reps there, and then let it go. Yes, and then one more. Good, and then let it go. And so the difference there, and I could just ask you, like, what was the difference in what you felt between the first one where you packed your shoulder and then the second one where you kind of let the shoulder blade go?
You're working a whole lot more here
yeah.
rather than isolating what's doing the work.
Right, right. So instead of isolating like posterior cuff, posterior delt, like the small muscles of the shoulder and the back, we're actually getting a lot of the rhomboids and mid traps to let go and to actually work more. And so in that case, like you just did a horizontal row there, you could do any variation with that principle in mind and get so much more out of it. So you can do like a bent over row. So that could be here and rowing this way, just letting the dumbbell or kettlebell or whatever weight that you have kind of take your shoulder forward and then pull it up, down and back. Any horizontal row that holds true. Any vertical row, it's the same thing. So okay, it could be a cable, it could be a band, you could actually use your body weight, but go to like a half kneel. You might have to go to a sitting position because you're so tall. So go to like a tall sit, pull it towards you, and then on the way up, control it, and then kind of let it take your shoulder. Good, scoot back a little bit. Heels on the ground, feel your sit bones on the ground. Good. So pull it to you. There you go, you're strong. And then slow and controlled, let the band take your shoulder. And that last little bit, again, your torso isn't rotating. It's just your shoulder blade coming up and around your rib cage. And then pull it in. Do a couple reps there. Yeah, good. And again. Good. So same principle. We're just you're good. You're just targeting different muscles and different parts of muscles by changing the angle of the pull, right? So vertical pulling, like you could be straight overhead. You could be here. The band's in my face. And doing like a strict pull up, going from here to then all the way up and all the way down. It's the same principle. That's just like as you can't get more vertical than that. And so you can go from a row here to a horizontal row to a more 125 degree angle to straight overhead. The principle is the same. If our goal is to work those muscles and to gain muscle strength there, then we got to get the shoulder blade to be freed up a little bit. Let the shoulder blade move. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if our goal is to just lift as much weight as possible, then limiting the range of motion is actually going to be beneficial. And so this is like Olympic bench pressing where you're arching your back. You're basically shortening that range of motion to your chest and then back up. You're going to be able to push a lot more weight in those scenarios than you can if your back was completely on the table and you're reaching the weight forward. We'll do a separate cut on specifically pressing with the same principle in mind. But say I'm doing a bent over barbell row. Let's grab a barbell. So say I load this thing up. If I pack my shoulders and then pull, it's going to be a lot easier than me actually letting that weight go from a stability perspective. And so like bilateral movements, 1 to 5 rep max movements, specifically compound, like hinging, deadlifting is what comes to mind in terms of this. If we limit range of motion, if we pack our shoulders down and we stabilize while there, shorten the distance of motion of the actual exercise, then it can actually be beneficial to pack your shoulders down and back. If we're just doing like accessory work and have more functional health and longevity goals, then we need to get those shoulder blades moving. And actually, it's not just like I say free the shoulder blade from like a coaching perspective, but when we do that, we actually open up the rib cage and the mid back more than probably anything else outside of adjustments, manipulation, and to the point where posture changes like crazy. So I've told this story to you before, but I've had older gentlemen in their 60s not be able to get their head, if they laid on the ground flat, they couldn't even get their head to touch the ground. Like it was off the ground and they were extended like this because of the forward head posture that they just had been in for so long. The answer to that isn't do chin tucks until I can get my head there. The answer is let's get the rib cage and the mid back to open up by doing unilateral, reciprocating, alternating, pressing and pulling in all directions consistently and over several months. All of them, legitimately all of them that I trained for at least 3 months, were able to lay on the ground flat with their head touching, like chin tucked. And so from a posture perspective, getting the shoulder blades to free up a little bit with those movements can go a long way for that stuff. And that's not something you hear from like, how do I improve my posture? It's way different than just sitting up tall and squeezing your shoulder blades down and back. It's actually the opposite. And so that's like, from a training perspective, what I try to portray to clients.